student once approached his teacher with a question that had been bothering him for a while. He said, "I've read so many books throughout my life, but I can't remember most of the information from them. What's the point of reading if I can't retain everything?" The teacher didn't respond immediately. He simply smiled and continued with his work, leaving the student's question unanswered. The student was a bit puzzled by the teacher's silence, but he knew there must be a reason for it. A few days later, the teacher invited the student to walk with him by the river. As they strolled, the teacher stopped, picked up an old, dirty pot that had several holes in its sides, and handed it to the student. "Take this pot to the river and bring me back some water," the teacher instructed. The student looked at the pot and immediately noticed the holes. He thought to himself, "How am I supposed to bring water with this pot? It's full of holes. The water will just leak out." But out of respect for his teacher, he didn't argue and set off to the river to fulfill the request. He filled the pot with water, but as expected, by the time he took a few steps back toward the teacher, the water had already drained through the holes. Undeterred, he returned to the river to try again, hoping he might move faster and bring back at least some water. But again, the water slipped away before he could get far. The student tried multiple times, each time with the same result. Frustration began to build as he realized that no matter how many times he tried, he simply could not bring the water to his teacher. The pot was leaking too quickly, and the task seemed impossible. After several attempts, he gave up and returned to the teacher, exhausted and disheartened. "I'm sorry, but I've failed. I can't bring water with this pot. It's impossible," the student admitted, feeling defeated. The teacher looked at him, still smiling kindly, and said, "You haven't failed, my dear student. Look at the pot." The student glanced down at the pot, confused. It was then that he noticed something he hadn't before. The pot, which had been filthy and covered in dirt, was now completely clean. The water, though it hadn't been retained, had washed away all the grime from the inside and outside of the pot as it flowed through. The teacher then explained, "You see, every time you filled the pot with water, even though the water didn't stay, it still served a purpose. It cleaned the pot bit by bit until all the dirt was gone." He paused for a moment to let the student absorb this realization and then continued, "Your mind is like this pot. The books you read are like the water. You may not remember all the information you take in, just as this pot couldn't hold the water. But with every book you read, your mind is being cleansed, enriched, and transformed. Each idea, emotion, or truth you encounter leaves its mark, even if you don't retain it consciously." The student began to understand what his teacher was trying to convey. The true value of reading wasn't in remembering every fact or piece of information, but in the subtle, cumulative transformation it created within. "Every book you read," the teacher continued, "adds to your understanding of the world and yourself. It shapes your thoughts, your emotions, and your soul. Over time, even though you may not recall specific details, the knowledge and wisdom from those books will have made you a more complete, compassionate, and insightful person." The student stood there, reflecting on the teacher's words. He realized that he had been focusing too much on the outcome, on what he could remember or retain, rather than the process of growth and learning that was happening in the background with every book he read. The teacher concluded with a final piece of wisdom. The purpose of reading is not to remember every word, but to undergo a process of transformation. Each time you finish a book, you are not the same person who started it. You grow, you evolve, and you become a better version of yourself. This is the true gift of reading. From that day on, the student's perspective on learning and reading changed. He no longer worried about remembering every fact or detail, but focused on the journey of learning and how each book was shaping his mind and soul.